Welcome to episode 7 of series 2 of Dalek Bumps Question Time. Dalek Kant asks, do you have any headcanon that differs from the official Dalek lore? And if so, what is it? This might be a controversial viewpoint for Dalek fans, but I personally believe that the Dalek timeline has been written and overwritten many times over many iterations of the Doctor Who universe. The various discrepancies in early Dalek history, such as the Dal-Khaled dichotomy, the so-called final end and evil of the Daleks and the subsequent alternate timeline created in Day of the Daleks, the inconsistent depictions of prototype Daleks being of a grey design matching the Dalek War era drones instead of the silver and blue designs of the early Daleks on Skaro from the 60s, the inclusion of bronze Daleks standing in for classic Daleks or featuring in time periods that would have previously featured classic designs, such as the events of Into the Dalek, The Pilot and Resolution. All of these things indicate to me that the Dalek timeline is not only a contradictory mess, thereby making it a complex space-time event, but it is also innately paradoxical, as the Daleks have overwritten their own timeline to such an extent that it is at best inherently unstable or at worst devastated beyond repair. I know there are alternate explanations for some of these discrepancies, such as the comic Dalek origins being potentially set in the Peter Cushing Dalek movie timeline, or the new Dalek paradigm going back in time to resume their old wars against humanity and the Malevolence. But even so, there are still many discrepancies in the Dalek timeline that lead me to believe that it is, in universe, a fundamentally broken thing. And hopefully that will play into a future episode featuring the Daleks, especially post-Flux where the whole universe is now on the brink. Thomas Hibbert asks, would you be interested in a survival horror game where you have to escape from being exterminated by a Dalek? Absolutely. In fact, I think a survival horror game will be the best way to depict Daleks in a video game. Imagine a game similar to Alien Isolation, in which you play as a crew member of a space station in the future that is attacked by Daleks, and you are knocked unconscious during the assault. You awaken hours later to find everyone else on the station dead, and that you are the last survivor, and that there are still Daleks stalking the empty corridors. Like most survival horror games, you would have to scavenge for useful items, and slowly progress through the area, while avoiding the monsters stalking you in the darkness. Daleks would actually make a great monster for a setting like this, as their design means they would prefer to stick to open corridors working to a predictable patrol pattern, allowing you to avoid them by ducking into alcoves or hatches. But their illuminated eye and sinister sound design could be used to great effect to make a menacing villain for a game like this. Once it sees you, you're dead. The trick is to hear them coming, avoid their line of sight and duck into cover before they appear. I think that would make a fantastic idea for a survival horror game personally. Folkblade9341 asks, will we ever have another TV appearance of either the Mechanoids or the Thals? I very much hope so. The Mechanoids and the Thals are both very interesting original concepts created by Terry Nation that flesh out the universe of early Dalek history. The Thals being the opposition to the Daleks, descended from the old enemy of the Khaleds, and the Mechanoids being a human-built counter to the Daleks, named by Davros in the Juggernauts as the perfect Dalek killers. If there is ever a Dalek-focused spin-off series produced as part of the Whoniverse later on down the line, the Mechanoids and the Thals are prime candidates to include in it. And finally, George052 asks, what is your least favourite Dalek story from Classic Who, New Who and Big Finish? That's an interesting question. On the whole, I like almost all the episodes featuring Daleks. There's a lot to love about different interpretations of the idea, different aspects of Dalek philosophy that different writers focus on, and the various different storylines and scenarios that Daleks can adapt to. However, my least favourite Dalek stories of any medium are the ones that fail to fully utilise their potential, or use the Daleks in a way that is detrimental to them overall. For Classic Who, the most disappointing Dalek story for me was Destiny of the Daleks. It aired during a so-called golden age of the show, yet it pales in comparison to its predecessor Genesis of the Daleks on almost every level. Issues with the script, props and location filming, as well as an apparent inability to maintain a consistent tone brings this episode down. And while there are some aspects of it that are praiseworthy, on the whole it sits on the lowest rung of my Classic Who episode ranking. For New Who, the single least effective Dalek episode for me has to be Asylum of the Daleks. There really isn't much more to say about this episode other than disappointing. The misleading marketing, misaligned focus and glaring misuse of a setting with great potential for a creepy Dalek story makes this episode the most disappointing New Who Dalek story for me. And in terms of Big Finish, the worst Dalek stories are without a doubt the most confusing ones. So that dubious honour has to go to Renaissance of the Daleks, a story that I rarely mention on this channel because to this day I still don't fully understand it, and by all accounts the people making it didn't understand it either. It's worth a listen if you want to be completely baffled, but other than that there really isn't much to say about it. And that's all we have for this episode of Dalek Bumps Question Time. You can join the Dalek Bumps Discord server using the link in the channel description to ask your own questions and chat to other Dalek fans. Leave your answers to these great questions in the comments below.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to
Dalek Bumps.